Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners. It is a lovely day here in suburban Chicago. The sun is beating down. The sky is still bright blue, just like it was in the last episode. But the sun has risen another, 10 degrees in the sky, or how much does it go? 30 degrees in the sky in an hour? Whatever, it's higher now and more oppressive than it was before. Which is fine, that's what the sun does. It's just, it's gonna be a warm walk home. Hopefully I don't get sunburned. Well, I hope that my reading roundup episode was pleasant for you, because we're returning to the well for our old standby. Something that's been every other episode for quite a while now, and I'm still I'm just starting to catch up. That's right, it's time for another shooting from the hip triple shot. For those of you who are new to the podcast, this feature is a quick review segment in which I talk about 3 different games that I've played recently for the first and second time, and I talk about what I thought of those games. It's kind of a first impressions review of 3 different games. I generally encourage you, this just gives you a glimpse of what the game is. Obviously, I haven't played it enough to be able to evaluate it in depth. You'll have to decide based on the conversation that I have with myself whether this looks like a game you want to check out or not. Today, I'm going to be talking about 3 games that I played for the first time recently. I'm past to the games I played at Origins Game Fair in June, but I'm still, 2 of these 3 games are still part of the June game slate, and then one of them is in July. So we're catching up, people. We're catching up. The first game I want to talk about is Tenpenny Parks. Tenpenny Parks was designed by Nate Linham, I think is his name, and it was published by Thunderworks Games. I have met Nate a couple times, and I would say we are friendly. He has become a regular at our board gaming club, Toggle Gaming. So if you take that for what it will. And he taught me the game and played it with me. Tenpenny Parks is a game about building a amusement park in, say, the 1920s or so. The art style uses, it's Vincent Dutrait art, so it looks great. And it's done in the style of the 1910s, 1920s. The art style reminds me a lot of the art from New York 1901, which of course was also Vincent Dutrait art, so it's not surprising that it's similar. In the game, you are building an amusement park, and your goal is to get victory points. And you mix between victory points and income. Different things that get you income will get you less victory points, as I recall. And the idea is that you are, over the course of several rounds, acquiring these different rides for your amusement park, which, like I said, gain you income and victory points. You also expand your amusement park by buying additional plots of land, and then sometimes you call in the arborist to remove trees that are in your way for building your amusement park. This game has a couple really nice things about it. The components are beautiful. It's a fun game to look at and to play. All the pieces are nice and chunky. The art, like I said, is beautiful. So it's a great looking game. Definitely a fun one to try out or to play when you get a chance. It also has a really nifty mechanism. So remember I said you're building rides. The rides are polyomino shapes. And when you go to place them in your area, the rule is that none of your rides can be next to each other. You need to leave space between the rides for people to move. You're allowed to have rides be diagonally adjacent, but they cannot be orthogonally adjacent. And I mean, this is a really interesting twist, because most games of this type have the rule is the other way. Barren Park would be the prime example there. When you put a feature into Barren Park, you must have it be adjacent to one of the things you played previously, whereas in this game, you cannot have it be adjacent. So and of course the ride pieces all have sort of weird shapes that you're trying to think about how you're going to place them in the field, and it makes for really compelling planning and gameplay. On your turn, you're going to be taking one of several actions. One of the actions is buying a ride. Some of the other actions are getting income, I think. No, you get income at the end of the round. Some of the other actions involve like expanding land or calling the arborist, or there are also some special power cards, as I recall. It has been a couple weeks since I played, so some of the details are a little fuzzy already. What is not fuzzy, however, is the experience of playing it, which was really fun. I liked Tenpenny Parks a lot as a medium weight Euro game with a little bit of interaction where you're taking the stuff other people want. There are points for you have 3 tracks. There's income, there's like enjoyment, and then there's reputation, I think. And as you raise your park on these 3 tracks, then at the end of the game, you get bonus points if you get to a certain position on the track. You also get points, or you also get different benefits during the game for being in first place or second place on any of these tracks. And that's a big part of trying to decide what you're going to do with your actions, because you only get a couple actions per round, and then it resets. And the game runs a limited number of rounds, so it's on a clock. You can't speed it up, you can't slow it down. All in all, I found Tenpenny Parks pretty enjoyable. I'm not sure yet if I want to buy it, but it certainly is in the realm of maybe. It might end up being, I think the theme would go over really well with my family, so it might be a game that I would get because I think my family would play it. So, Tenpenny Parks from Thunderworks Games. Check it out if you get a chance. The next game I want to talk about is another game that involves polyomino shapes and a space where you're putting stuff. Thematically, it's not that dissimilar from Tenpenny Parks. This is The Magnificent. Now, The Magnificent is from Svensson, the Svenssons. I can't remember their first name. Amundsen, or Christian Svensson, I think, and Amundsen Svensson, or Amundsen Svensson. I don't remember. You can look it up, or there's a link to the Board Game Geek page on the show notes for this episode. But The Magnificent is about a traveling carnival. They don't really say where. And you are creating a carnival and hosting it and getting points for doing so. The game has 3 different things you can do on your turn. I'm going under a cicada tree. I don't know if you can hear that, but the noise is quite distinctive. This isn't a cicada year as far as I can tell, but I think the way it works is that there are always some cicadas that wake up every year. It's just every 17 years, or every 7 years, some rhythmic number, there's a huge pod of them. And other than that, there aren't that many. So in The Magnificent, every turn, it's a dice drafting game. So every turn you're going to take a die, and that gives you your base power for the die. Then you're going to put it on one of 4 master cards you have. On the top half of these master cards is a bonus that you get when you use that card. So when you take your die and put it on there, you then get the bonus. Some of the bonuses are dice specific, like you might get to pretend that the die is too high if you took a purple die and put it on that card. Other ones might just give you some money, or they might give you something else. Then you take that number that's on the die you just took, and you add in the numbers of any other dice of the same color. There's also a colorless die. I'm not going to explain that right now, but it's pretty flexible. Then whatever number you have, that is your power number. And your power number determines how strong the action you're taking is going to be. Then you have 3 choices about what action you're going to take. You can travel, in which case you're going to pick one of 3 carts, and you're going to move it and get bonuses for moving the carts. And the bonuses can include buying a new tent, getting a new tent for your carnival, getting money and gems, and recruiting new performers, or what they call posters in the game. And then the travel action. The second action is the build action, and the way that works is just you choose a number of buildings to build based on how strong that action was, and you have to build buildings in the color of the die you took. So if you want to build green buildings, you have to take a green die. There are 3 different colors of dice, and each color of building has 2 sizes, a big one and a small one. And they're always the same shape, so if you want the particular shape, you have to take a building in that particular color to get that particular. Like, for example, the small green building is a green square of 4 spaces. Meanwhile, the small orange building is the Tetris T. It's 3 blocks in a row, and then 1 block attached to the side of that in the middle of the 3 blocks. So sort of like a T with a short foot. So when you take those buildings, then you put them on your board. As with, not with Tenpenny Parks, but with many other games, once you've started on your board, you have to place everything else orthogonally adjacent. However, you can start anywhere you want. And in this game, like in Baron Park, when you cover up something on the board, you then get that thing. So there's this, or Gingerbread House does that too. You're doing this, or Llama Land. you're doing this placing of pieces and then collecting of bonuses when you do your buildings. There's another current, so there's money and there's these crystals in the colors of the dice, and then there's buildings. Once you've done those two things, the third possible action that you can take is a performance. When you do a performance, you look at the power level that you got to, and that determines how many different performers can be in your show. Remember I said that you could get posters. Those posters are performers. And so in order for the performer to work, you have to have the right buildings built. So you might have a performer who needs 2 small green buildings. If you don't have 2 small green buildings, you can't use that performer. You also then have to have that performer in one of your tents. So if you don't have a tent, you can't use that performer. Finally, some performers also require that you spend gems of a particular color. If you don't have those gems, you can't use that performer. But when you do have all those things, then you use that performer and you get a bunch of points and money based on your performance. Once everybody's taken 4 actions, then the round ends and everyone scores one of their cards that they had. Everyone gets a new card as well as a new power. There's a whole bunch more stuff in the game, or nuance, that I'm not going to explain right now. I've played it twice and I really like it. The Magnificent is definitely staying in my collection. It's a really solid dice drafting game with interesting puzzles to deal with. It would probably get kind of samey if you played it all the time, but my collection's big enough that I'm not going to play it all the time. I'll play it occasionally, and when I play it, I'm going to really enjoy it. Now, there's one standout thing to think about or concern for the game. This is something that occurred to me before, and then I sort of studied the game, and I don't know, I guess I got over it, or I decided it wasn't a concern. I haven't seen much writing on it, but so the main character on the front of the box is a circus performer, and they are wearing a black mask over their nose and mouth and chin, kind of wrapped around. And then on the mask, there is drawn a big smiley face. That smiley face is drawn in white, but when looked at from a certain perspective, it looks like it could be doing a kind of blackface imagery. Now, I don't think that's the intent. I think it's meant to be a smile, and it's just the color palette of the picture. But I could see and understand that interpretation of it, and because that's not my favorite piece of art. But I don't see anything else in the game that represents that sort of thing. So at worst, I would say it's insensitive, but I wouldn't say it's actively depicting blackface, but rather just there's a resemblance that is concerning. So that's something to be aware of if you're thinking about the Magnificent. And last, I have a short, quick response to a game that I tried. This is a game I picked up from Goodwill, and I tried with my son. I don't know how long this will stay in my collection. It seems like a game we might play occasionally just because it's cute, but it's pretty silly. This is Tetris. It's a board game version of the popular computer game from the mid-'80s. In this game, you have a vertical tray that you can drop tiles into, and in the bingo style, like of number 11 or number 9, or other games like that, a card will be revealed that shows one of the shapes. You take that shape, you drop it into your tray, then you do the next. It plays just like Tetris, the board game. You get points for every completed row, or like Tetris, the video game, except that the completed rows don't vanish, obviously. You get points for every completed row that you manage, and you get points for whenever you manage to drop a shape in such a way that it lines up with an icon on the tray, or on the, I don't know what you call it, the vertical tray, that indicates a particular kind of shape. So they want you to put a yellow square here. If you manage to do that, you get some extra points. It's a fine game, a nice little filler. The form factor is really cute, and I'll definitely keep it around because it's amusing, but it's certainly not a game I would recommend going to pay $30 for. I don't know how much they charge at Target, but I paid $2 at Goodwill, and that was a good price for me. That is Tetris, the board game. Well, thanks for joining me on my walk today. Have you played any of these games? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and share your thoughts on them. I look forward to hearing them. Until next time, I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye. Shooting from the Hip is a review segment. If you're new to the podcast, you didn't know that Shooting from the Hip Just in case you're new to the podcast, I'll introduce this episode. In case you're new to the episode, in case you're new to the podcast, this feature.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.